I'm talking with Monty Alexander, a very famous jazz musician. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me, and welcome to Kidsworld TV.
Thank you for your welcome, and I'm very glad to be with you today, Zach.
For many years, you have been a big star in jazz. How did it all start?
Well, for me, music was the beginning. I was 4 years old, and I would go play the piano in our home, in my hometown of Kingston, Jamaica. And I started to play, and I played, and I kept playing. And then one day somebody gave me a job, and I'm still doing it.
Wow.
Yep.
You came from Jamaica, where music is different than it is in the United States. Who did you listen to growing up?
All the music I heard, that I listened to. Every music, all kinds. Old music, the new music, the rock and roll music, the Jamaican calypso music, and I listened to jazz. I heard jazz, and I heard my favorite musician, Louis Armstrong.
Did they have jazz music in Jamaica?
Absolutely. We had a jazz radio, well, it was a radio station that played all kinds of music, including certain jazz pieces. And there were musicians there that loved jazz. And they were always having jam sessions and playing jazz. And I would go to see them play, and I'd get real excited. And one day they invited me to join in. Yeah.
Okay. When I think of music in Jamaica, I think of reggae music. Did reggae music affect your music in any way?
Well, it's funny to tell you this, but I was playing music before reggae started, and before the name reggae. So it was kind of created bit by bit, slowly but surely. Started in the 70s, and I was already playing the piano on recordings before that.
You became a famous piano player in jazz. When did you start playing piano?
Well, I started when I was very young, like 4 years old, but I became a professional, and profession means when you work and they pay you for it, right? So I became a professional when I was 15 years old.
You also played an instrument called a maraca. What is a maraca?
Let me tell you, the right pronunciation is melodica. Melodica, and it's like a cousin, I call it a cousin, of the accordion, that thing that you play on your chest. And it's made of plastic, but it is easy to play. And I started playing the accordion first, but then later on I found the melodica. And I didn't even mean to play it in a performance, but I did little by little. I started to play it, and I enjoyed it, and the people enjoyed it, so I kept playing it.
If someone was interested in becoming a jazz musician, what advice would you give them?
Well, the best advice I can give them is to listen to lots of music that you like. The ones that you like. Listen to it and enjoy it, because it's something very wonderful. It can make you feel good, and I always like that music that gave me a smile. So that's what I recommend anybody to do.
You have worked with many other jazz musicians. Who are some of those?
Well, in the jazz world, I worked with Sonny Rollins. I worked with Clark Terry, great trumpeter. I worked with Tony Bennett, the great singer. I worked with a lot of great people, Milt Jackson, Dizzy Gillespie. So I had a lot of adventures playing with the kings of jazz music.
Years ago, jazz was the most popular type of music. Why did that change, and music like rock and roll become popular?
A big reason, I think, because everybody has a different reason, is because jazz started to become more complicated. And the earlier jazz had a rhythm. And people heard the rhythm and they got up and danced to the rhythm. And they felt good when they danced to the rhythm. So little by little, jazz became less popular. But it's still there. And jazz is a great American art form. And we call it American classical music. Instead of jazz, I like to say American classical music.
You play your music all over the world. Are there other countries where jazz is more popular than it is in here in the United States?
In a manner of speaking, you could say in Europe, more people by percentage love jazz than Americans today. But there are a lot of big fans, a lot of great fans for jazz still in America. But overseas, people appreciate it more, I think.
If someone asks you what jazz music was, how would you describe it?
You know, that's not a simple answer, but I think jazz is a musical conversation. Like you and I are talking now, if you were playing a trumpet and I played a saxophone, we could be talking to each other through our musical instruments. And it brings people together to be able to say, life is good.
So that's all the questions I have for you. It's nice meeting you, Monty Alexander.
Well, I just want to say it was a real pleasure speaking with you today, and I wish you the best in your journey of these interviews that you'll have with other musicians, and it's great that you're here to make these documents, we call it. So thank you very much for inviting me, Zach, and I wish you the best. Shake.